Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Kimberly Byers. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Rochester metro area, and I am so impressed at the turnout here, given the torrential rain. You are awesome citizens. The League, if you don't know, is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We influence public policy through education and advocacy, and we focus significant effort on registering voters and encouraging all citizens to get out and vote. By the way, the League of Women Voters is not just for women. We welcome men. Come and join us to make democracy work for all. If you are not registered to vote, or if you've moved since the last election, please feel free to visit our table in the back. We do have voter registration forms. And I thought I'd share a couple of important dates for you. October 11th, that's the last date to register for the general election on November 5th. It's also the last day to change your party affiliation, if you so desire, for the presidential primary in June of next year, so quite a bit earlier than that election. So an important date. Be sure to mark your calendar. It's just a few days away, June 25th, to cast your ballot in the upcoming primary. Polls open at noon and close at 9. And consider being an advocate for democracy. Bring a neighbor, bring a friend to the poll with you. To find information on your polling place and candidates, we do sponsor a site called www.vote411.org, and that's .org. You will find candidate biographies, along with statements written and submitted by the candidates, so their own words. As a couple of final bits of housekeeping, restrooms, in case you need them, through that exit sign on my left toward the back, and they're on the right there. And as you will notice, this event is being recorded. If you have any issues with that or don't want to be seen, just tap our recorder there and she'll make sure to accommodate you. So the League is pleased to sponsor this candidate forum in partnership with several community groups, namely the Brown Cross Neighborhood Association, the North Whitten Village Neighborhood Association, and the Park Meigs Neighborhood Association. Tonight, our distinguished panel includes the candidates that will be on the ballot for the Rochester City Council East District. We are honored tonight to have Shirley Thompson, former member of the Rochester City School District Board of Education, as our moderator. She will introduce the candidates and explain the guidelines for tonight's event. We request, of course, that all our guests respect our panel, our hosts here at the Lutheran Church of the Incarnate Word, and the League's own commitment to civil and respectful discourse. So I would now like to introduce Tom LaDuca from the Park Meigs Neighborhood Association.
To the Women League voters, to the candidates, to the fellow voters that are here tonight, good evening. My name is Tom LaDuca. I'm president of Park Meigs Neighborhood Association. And our association was established around 1960, and we've been very active since 1960. The other night I was watching a news broadcast, and it was based on a happening in a big city. And I noticed that the broadcaster mentioned in the middle of this catastrophe how important neighborhood associations were and how it brought people together and how it bonded everything together in that city, and how neighborhood associations were actively involved, and they were voiced and got things done and made things happen in that situation. We, as a neighborhood association, try to follow those same things in our neighborhood association. So that kind of hit home. Our neighborhood association has a positive impact in our community, and is probably one of the most desirable communities in the city. However, that's why other parts of our city need strong neighborhood associations as well. We can be a leader in our city, and our practice can impact the rest of the city. ParkMEG's Neighborhood Association last year attended probably several hundred meetings at City Hall with representation through letters and representation through some of our board members that attended those neighborhood meetings. And we feel that that really makes a difference in our city. Our association has been there for the city, for our neighborhood, and I feel has made a difference through the years. Through the years, we primarily are interested, and our goals have been crime prevention, beautification, and also encouraging housing and businesses to follow practices in the zoning area as well as the preservation area, keeping our community viable. At this time, I would like to introduce the moderator, Shirley, and wish the candidates good luck. Thank you very much.
Things I don't travel without, my water and my fan. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Shirley Thompson, and I would like to start by saying thank you to the Browncroft, North Winton Village, and ParkMEG's neighborhood associations for co-sponsoring this forum, and to the Lutheran Church of the Incarnate Word for hosting it. A few more housekeeping items, just in case they weren't covered. If you haven't been asked to silence your cell phone, please do so now so that we don't have any unexpected interruptions. And were you told where the bathrooms were? Yes. Okay. And if we have to leave in an emergency, we can leave through the entrance you entered through. There's also an exit sign over here behind you to the right, but we don't anticipate that. Alrighty, there are no recordings of this event, please. The League of Women Voters will record it and make it available on their website. Alrighty, so I'd like to start by thanking the candidates, and I'm just going to position this so that I can make sure my voice is being picked up. I want to thank the candidates for the Rochester City Council East District seat for being here this evening. I heard you this afternoon on the Connections program, so I know this is at least your second forum today. Ain't campaigning fun? The first round of questions that will be asked tonight has been prepared by the sponsoring organizations. The questions will be directed to each candidate, And we'll move down the line so that everyone has a chance to answer at least one question first. And then written questions can be submitted by audience members, and they'll be asked in the second round. Questions will have been screened by the sponsors so that we can make sure there are no duplications and that the questions are relevant. Pen and paper is available to you. Okay, and we just ask that you write legibly, because if we can't read it, we can't ask the question. And when will that be passed out? Okay. Okay, so shortly before, if you haven't gotten your paper and pen, raise your hand and someone will come and bring it to you. The candidates have drawn numbers to determine their seating order and the order in which they'll respond to questions. They will each have 1.5 minutes to answer a question. Visible time notices, candidates, will be displayed to let you know how much time you have left. And Judy Weinstein over here is the bearer of the time cards. Will you be able to make that out? How much time is left on each card?
The green is 30, yellow is 15, red is stop. Finish the sentence.
And along those lines, in the spirit of fairness, I will strictly enforce the time limits, even if it means interrupting a candidate who goes beyond finishing a sentence. Interruptions will not be done out of disrespect, but rather to ensure that you all receive equal airtime. Candidates are not allowed to question each other. They will each give up to a 1-minute remark to open the session. And then after the round of audience questions, each candidate will have 1 more minute to make a closing statement. Following the closing remarks by the Brown-Croft Norton Village Neighborhood Association, the candidates will be available to speak informally with audience members. Okay, so far so good? Very quiet group. We'll begin by my reading brief introductions that were submitted by the candidates. First, Wayne Harris here, immediately to my left, to your left also. Wayne Harris has served the city of Rochester for over 30 years as an advocate for neighborhoods, families, and small businesses. He believes that change is always accomplished when we work together. To Wayne's left and your right is Bryce Miller. Bryce Miller has owned his home since 2007 in the North Winton Village neighborhood. He writes that, and I quote, "Rochester is changing, and as a community, we need to make many different decisions about our future." He says that with your help, I want to see our neighbors put first. To his left, and further to your right, is Michael Geraci. Michael has lived in Rochester his entire life, besides his time at Lemoyne College and the University of Dayton Law School, and is the founding attorney of Rochester-based Geraci Law Offices. He has served as the president of the Rochester Ataxia Foundation, on the board of directors of the Colin F. Kennedy Foundation, as well as a volunteer mentor attorney with the Rochester Teen Court. To Michael's left, your right, is Stanley Martin. Stanley Martin is the project director at the Center for Community Alternatives and the director of the Safer Monroe Area Reentry Team. This year, she was inducted into the Strong Nonprofits for a Better New York Notable Woman in Human Services Hall of Fame. That's a mouthful. For her career in human services, advocacy, fighting for equity, and meaningful public policy advancement. And then on your far right is Mary Lupian. Mary Lupian, a Beechwood resident, is a mother, a bilingual city school teacher, and an activist in her community, fighting for affordable housing, tenants' rights, police accountability, better public transportation, and local climate action. Ken mentioned that These forums are conducted according to League of Women Voters shared agreements about behavior. And each of the candidates has agreed to conduct the debate or this forum in a civil, fact-based, issue-oriented manner. Okay, here we go. Starting with Mr. Harris. What issue made you decide to run, excuse me. Yes. Pardon me. First, we have 1 minute for each candidate, going from Wayne all the way down to Mary, to give 1 minute of opening remarks. Thank you very much for that catch, Judy.
Are we going to use the mic? I mean, I can speak. Can everyone hear me, or should we use the microphone?
Use the mic.
Wonderful. Good evening.
Is that better?
Yes.
You can all hear me now? Good evening. My name is Wayne Harris, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to the church, the Lutheran Church, and also to the League of Women Voters for inviting us down. I'm not going to, reintroduce myself because we've already gone through that, but I am looking forward to having this discussion and hearing some of your ideas. So thank you for having us here.
Good evening. I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and the church for having us. My name is Bryce Miller, as you have heard. I've devoted my entire adult life to trying to improve my neighborhood. I have been the vice chair of Northwood Village Association and the president of North of East Maine Neighbors United. The reason why NEMNU had come together was we all had quality of life issues in our neighborhood. Each one of our founding board members had the same thing in common. Our home was burglarized. We worked with city officials, our police department, and with each other to bring our neighborhood to where it is today, which is a very safe, quality of life neighborhood to live in, which we're very proud of. I'm very happy to be here, and I look forward to the questions tonight.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Michael Geraci. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm running because I love this city and I love our district. I've lived in the city my entire life. I have been lucky to have had service and engagement in the community instilled in me since I was young, and I've taken that very seriously. Participating in things such as Operation Clean Sweep, cleaning our neighborhoods, and understanding that each and every one of us need to participate and do our own part to make our neighborhoods safer, more vibrant, and better for all of us. As I mentioned in my intro, I'm an attorney. I represent individuals in employment, labor unions, and criminal defendants. I believe it's important to bring advocacy to the council. We represent everyone in our district, even those we do not see eye to eye with. We need to be able to analyze important, complex issues, and need to be able to explain the rationale for your decisions. And all of those decisions, in my mind, are to be in the benefit of my neighbors in our community. So thank you all, and I look forward to speaking with you more this evening.
The usual dramatic stance. My name is Stanley Martin, and I'm running to unwaveringly represent your interests and ensure that your voice is amplified when it comes to decision making in our city. I'm here to ensure that policies that we make moving forward are based in equity and the dismantling of systemic oppression. I have many different identities, ranging from being the child of a West African immigrant who understands how education can transform the lives of generations to come. I'm here to fight for equity and ensure that everyone here and everyone who I'm representing understands that we have very complex issues in Rochester that interlock to prevent upward mobility, and I'm here to address all those issues and ensure that we take action for a better Rochester. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Lupian, and I'm running because we deserve city representation that not only works for us, but with us. The people of this city, we know what we need. That's why we need our voices at the table, letting our city government know how they can support the success of our neighborhoods. I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, and I'm an activist in my community. And it's from that perspective that I can see how hard our families are trying to support their households, just to barely scrape by. And so we are fighting for a thriving and livable Rochester where everyone has access to a stable, quality, affordable home, where police are held accountable by the communities that they serve, and where our transportation gets us to where we need to go, all while leading us to a more green and sustainable future. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions tonight.
Thank you all. Now we'll begin the questions. Beginning with Wayne Harris, what issues made you decide to run for city council?
Thank you. So I don't want to pull this too close, I spent 30 years working with the Rochester Police Department. I retired as a deputy chief of police. And in the course of my career, I was lucky enough to serve as the NSC lieutenant here in the Southeast. I had a car beat over on the old Gateway projects on Mount Hope. And as the deputy chief of police, I was the deputy chief of community engagement and relations, which meant I was the person that was out in the community actually talking to people and building relationships and working on the issues that were impactful here, not only in the East District, but also in the city of Rochester. And I thought that my experience gives me a perspective that perhaps some of my colleagues here don't share. I thought that since service is what I've done for 30 years, when Elaine Spall, who has done an excellent job serving in this district, when she decided to not seek re-election, I thought I can continue to serve. So I'm concerned with issues like our educational system, which has failed our students for decades now. And I'm interested in things like poverty and all of the things that orbit poverty, things like crime, things like health issues, things like poor education. So I'm embarking on this to address those and to continue in my efforts to build relationships with you to solve our problems.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris.
The reason I decided to run for city council was not something that I took lightly. It is something that I had thought about quite a while, and some people said maybe you got to do it a little too late, but it was something I really wanted to take the time to make sure I knew what I was doing. As far as the reasons for running, I have been a neighborhood volunteer and leader for many years. I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to our representation, whether it's from council or city hall. I think it's very important to get back down to the basics and bring neighbors back to the table and put neighbors first. I think that's extremely important. We got to get away from the political infighting. We need to get away from the backroom deals. We really need to represent the neighbors that we are elected to represent. Just a couple examples. Cobb's Hill and our library parking lot in Northwood Village, which I can explain more later, are just certain items of where, unfortunately, the city has come to a deadlock with neighborhoods, and it's just a shame. We also need to work on our poverty, and we need to work on our schools. And I've met many people in my neighborhood who cannot even afford to clothe their children, and that's just a travesty to me. Thank you.
So for me, having lived in Rochester my whole life and bought a house in North Windsor, which I never expected to leave, seeing our city named as one of the poorest in the nation was shameful and really was a rise to action for me. That, hand in hand with the state of our school district, tells me this is the time to be involved, and this is the time where action and advocacy are paramount and important. Another observation was, I think, unfortunately, the state of discourse when we're discussing these important issues. We need to remember, as a city council person, your duty is to represent everyone that is in your district, even those that you don't see eye to eye with. So you've seen some of the very complex issues surrounding police accountability, surrounding housing, and seeing, in my opinion, the back and forth of those meetings is counterproductive. And we need, again, to take a sense of balance, a sense of reason. We need to do things that are within the bounds of the law, and things that will, again, advance important policies and practices that are in the best interests of our community and of the East District. And that's why I'm running.
Thank you. So I've lived through extreme childhood poverty where we didn't know what we were going to eat, we didn't have furniture, and really understanding what that means for my family and people in my neighborhood was a huge trigger to run for this position. I'm the youngest candidate running for office. I'm 26 years old, and I hold a graduate degree in community mental health counseling from the University of Rochester. Within that time, I've worked at the jail providing services to the most vulnerable members of our society who are impacted by mental illness and substance use disorder, and we see them being criminalized because they're poor. I'm running because I understand what that means, not for the people who are being affected, but the larger community as a whole. We are as strong as our weakest link, and I am running to strengthen all our links and make sure that there is representation when it comes to people who are impacted by the policies we make. I bring in a very unique perspective with my human services and advocacy work, and I do believe that being an independent young mind, I can change the course of our future. Thank you.
Hi, Mary Vivian. My desire to run for office was really born out of the work that I've been doing in the community for the last 15 years. As an activist, we organize the community, we bring them to city council, we bring them to county ledge meetings, and then we ask for the leaders to do what we're hoping. And it was really when I was working in the Bernie Sanders campaign that I kept hearing the message over and over, if you want social change, stand up and run for local office. And so after hearing that many times, I decided, why can't I be one of those decision makers? And really work with the community in kind of co-strategizing and, being able to proactively approach the community and let them know what's happening. And what's going on in my neighborhood with the displacement and the severe lack of affordable housing, it's really shaped my platform. These aren't issues that, I came up with myself. They're really born out of the community needs. And I'm really excited to be able to make some serious social change in Rochester. Thank you.
Thank you all. Our next question I'll direct first to Mr. Miller, and then we'll move down the line. In addition to its assets, the Rochester community has a variety of challenges, many of them interwoven. What do you see as a key underlying factor of those challenges?
Thank you for the question. I think a very large key to these challenges is our poverty in the city. There's a lot of people who just can't get by. They struggle. They have to find ways to get to work. They have to get rides. They don't have time to pay the attention to their children that they need to because they have to work multiple jobs, which hurts our education system, which ultimately brings down our graduation rates, and our children are being left behind. I think that's extremely important to help lift people out of poverty. We've had way too many nonprofits in the city that have not worked. We have too many people on payroll and not enough action. We really need to come together as a community and really help lift people out of poverty. It should not be a generational issue. At some point, we really need to get people on the right track to be successful. I think it's extremely important to be successful. As someone who grew up with a single mother who struggled to make ends meet, it is something very personal to me to know what does happen in the city, and I want to make sure that everybody does have that opportunity to be as successful as they possibly can, and in doing that we need to work together to make that happen. Thank you.
So the question was, what are the key underlying factors of some of the challenges that we see here in Rochester? And
Just to clarify, it's what is a key underlying factor?
Okay, well, I want to say, jumping the gun, quite frankly, okay? Not analyzing facts and everything that we need to before we make decisions. And a key example right now, in my opinion, is with the proposed takeover of the school district. At a time when we have a recommendation on the table from the distinguished educator, when we have potentially 5 new school board members coming in, and when we have a new superintendent. I think that to pursue practices, policies, or a takeover in this case, without having considered some of our local resources, the expert advice, and some of the incoming elected officials that we are all going to choose very soon, that's a mistake. We need to have consistency, balance, and again, I keep saying it, but advocacy. You need to look at all points before we make these very important decisions, which affect all of our lives.
A key structural underlying issue is systemic racism. Within our policies, within the framework of how we see people in our society, there's inherent racism. This is exemplified in redlining and the strategic systemic disinvestments in the neighborhoods of color. We see that this triggers poverty, the socioeconomic splitting of people who are poor and people of color in one neighborhood, then it's strategically disinvested in, and then they have a lack of access to quality education. The racial lines and the racial divides that have been generationally impacting our city really underline all the issues we see. Poverty is tied to racism, low socioeconomic status is tied to racism, and many of the issues we see are grounded in racism. So until we understand the role race plays in how policies are made, we will struggle to create effective policy that makes change.
I am not sure I could have said it better. I housing is one of the main issues in my platform because it's so foundational to poverty. But if you look underneath housing, you'll go back to redlining, just as Stanley mentioned, and you'll see that the communities that are in the most extreme poverty are the same communities that were redlined and denied access to loans that people who share my skin color were granted. They were denied access to the middle class and the ability to build wealth with homeownership. If you look at our police system, we're calling for accountability. Underneath that is racism. You know, we all share implicit bias, and especially with our police force who are charged with enforcing our laws, if we're not looking at our implicit bias and being instructed on how to root it out, then we can't fix the situation. So I do believe that systemic racism is our #1 problem that is feeding into our extreme poverty.
So I think the #1 factor that's impacting the challenges that are facing us is a generational aspect of what's going on. The generational nature of the poverty that we're facing and all the problems that come along with that. The generational nature of our failed school district that has seen families grow up within the system and having kids, and those kids growing up in that system and continuing to fail. We have a society right now, we have a demographic in our community that can't help each other rise up out of that poverty line. And as we take a look at the things like crime, if we take a look at the things like mental health issues or just health issues, you know, I think if we focus on that aspect, if we recognize what we're dealing with as being generational and not just happening today, then we can start actually making or developing sustainable solutions to address them. Thank you.
Thank you all. Mr. Geraci, you'll have first crack at this. How would you stop the flow of drugs and violence in Rochester?
Well, that's an interesting question. A couple of things. First of all, I would support any legislation to decriminalize marijuana in the city. I think that's an important factor, and actually a lot of the judicial candidates and the DA are making the same, DA candidates making the same position. I think that it's very important we need to support our police, okay, as many ways as we can. Police, fire. I'm very proud and happy to see that they are proposing a new police station over on Goodman Street. It's beautiful. It's going to lie within the character of our community. And to support our sworn public servants and police officers is to help stop curb crime and to keep drugs and violence out of our cities. So I'd like to see more police officers riding around the community. And I think that we've done a fabulous job of having police engagement and presence. And again, by supporting those important institutions, our Rochester Police Department, that's how we help to curb the stop all crime.
We must be extremely careful to not start a war on drugs here in Rochester. We know what happened when the war on drugs was started in our nation, and we know the results of that. It didn't work. Over-policing does not stop drugs and crime. Stopping drugs and crime comes with understanding the structural issues that propel people towards choosing a life involved in drugs and crime. When people don't have access to alternative opportunities, or they can't see an alternative future that involves being members of society who invest in the society, they're going to turn to the options available to them. We have to create strong communities and strong neighborhoods that allow people to have access to education, education to job opportunities, and education for even parents who have kids that are very young. Even creating programs or investing in these summer opportunities so children don't become delinquents during the summer. Those are the programs we as a city can invest into to address drugs and crime. Over-policing is not the answer. We have to understand that drug use and crime comes from a lack of options. Thank you.
I think the way that we solve crime is that we understand that crime is born out of poverty and inequity. And there's an African proverb that really puts it well in that if a child does not feel the embrace of the village, it will burn it down to feel its warmth. We are failing our youth. They do not have opportunities. They do not see a viable future for them. They do not feel that their lives are valued. And so they act out of that. I work with 8th graders in the city school district, and I see how they are viewed by teachers that come in from out of this community and have a certain idea of what city kids are like and what our community is like. You know, the message that they give is that the key is education to escape your terrible communities and make something of yourself. And that makes them feel terrible about where they come from, their families, their communities. And it doesn't, if they do make it out, it doesn't give them the incentive to come back and make it a better place. So drugs, you know, addiction is a disease. Thank you.
We know how to do this. In fact, many of you here in this room, I see Mary's here, I see Marilyn is here. This works because of the neighborhood associations. That's how we stop crime. North Winton Village took on the drugs that were going on down on East Main Street. They tackled it. Mary, sometimes frighteningly so, but she got out there and she did it because she developed a relationship with the police department. They decided that it was no longer going to occur in their community, and they took care of it. That's how we get this done. Now, there's not a police agency on this planet that has enough resources to solve every single problem. The only way it can be done is through community cooperation and the development of a relationship between law enforcement and the community that it serves. So I'm actually very, very happy that Tom from Parks and Recs opened this up, talking about the relationship and talking about the neighborhood associations and the work that they can do. Because together, we can take care of the drugs, we can take care of the violence. That's how we stop it. Together, we develop strategies to address it.
This is a very large quality of life issue in our neighborhoods and in our entire city, and it's not something that I take lightly. Unfortunately, I have a very personal experience with this. My sister, 10 years ago, was hooked on heroin due to the people that she had surrounded herself with and made some poor choices. Thankfully, she's still here and she's been clean for about 9 or 10 years now as well. But it is not something that I take lightly at all. It has devastated my family. As far as, you know, talking about poverty, poor people are not bad people. Not everybody turns to that life. Drugs are something that destroy families, and we need to make sure that we combat these heroin overdoses in our city especially. There's just too many families being destroyed every single day in the city and in the surrounding areas in the county. This is not just a city issue. We do need to support our police and our fire department. I think it is imperative that we work with our agencies to make sure that these people, our citizens, get the help that they need. And also we need to get the citizens beds.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you.
I'm sorry, no. You can include whatever you'd like to say in your next response. And we will begin with Ms. Martin. Do you support the proposed referendum on the Police Accountability Board? And please use your time to explain your response.
I 100% support the proposed referendum on the Police Accountability Board. I am a member of the Executive Committee of the Police Accountability Board Alliance, and I believe that we need to have oversight of the police based on civilians and people who the police serve. Far too often, the police are not held accountable for the decisions that they make that impact communities and end up in community distrust of policing. I think the Police Accountability Board can actually increase community trust in policing because when a few bad police officers do bad things, they are held accountable, and police officers can also use the Police Accountability Board to report instances of misconduct without having to worry about whistleblower consequences and things that may deter them from otherwise reporting their counterparts who are engaging in misconduct. I strongly support anything that involves civilian oversight and anything that involves shared power in the community.
So I just want to make a comment about neighborhood associations and crime before I answer the question, if it's okay. Neighborhood associations are wonderful, and North Winton Village did do a lot to reduce their crime problem, but I would like to posit that it didn't go away, it just moved. And unless you're engaged in transformative work with individuals, helping them improve their own lives, the crime is just shifting around. As for the Police Accountability Board, I am a strong supporter of the current legislation. I'm a member of the Police Accountability Board Alliance, representing mothers out front, and I've been fighting for this legislation. I too believe that it will ultimately create more trust in the community and help the police do their jobs better. You know, there's fear on both sides. And when you act out of fear, you make decisions that maybe aren't for the best decision. And I think, you know, with the Police Accountability Board, it will help reduce the risk on both sides and help the police ultimately do their jobs better. Thank you.
I do not support the Police Accountability Board, and if I were elected to council, I would not vote for it. Primarily and fundamentally because it's punitive in nature. And it goes against the concept of community policing that the city of Rochester has determined, and quite rightly, is the best way for a police department and community to work together. If you're not clear, community policing is not an officer just, you know, waving as he drives by or walking down the street. It's a collaboration. It's a relationship between the police department and the community to collectively solve those issues that are impactful to both. That's actually the definition. I sit on the National Executive Board for an organization called NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. I've been working on this particular situation my entire career, and I can tell you right now, the best practices for making sure police or a police department does what it's supposed to do and a community is as healthy as it can be is for everyone to work together. Thank you.
I am against the Police Accountability Board. That does not mean that I am not for oversight. I do think that we do need to make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to. That goes for any job. I do also believe that we can really make a difference with citizens and police. And I also believe that means we need to hire more police officers in the sense of if we have more police officers, our response times will go down. Are up, excuse me. We've had some issues with response times. As far as if they are able to have the response times, they can get out of the car, and talk with citizens and be able to engage, and citizens can trust the police more, the police can trust the citizens more. And I just think it's very important. As far as the PAB is a lot of money, and my concern is that we're taking a lot of money from our fire department. I'd like to know where the money is coming from. Thank you.
So the question was, are you on board with the proposal for a police accountability referendum? A referendum at this point is a poll, essentially. It's democracy at its finest. So sure, I'm down to have the public vote on whether they would support a police accountability board at all. However, I am not in favor of the legislation that's on the table. I'll explain that in a moment. But first I want to talk about my background a bit. I started my professional career in 2012 as an attorney at a firm called Trevette, Cristo, Salzer, and Andolina. I was very fortunate to start off representing labor unions, teachers, firefighters, and law enforcement. I've also, since that time, represented criminal defendants, so I have represented folks on both sides of this issue for many years. And again, advocacy for both of those is important, both of those parties. But what I do not propose, or do not support the proposed initiative for the PAB on the table at this point is it's not legal. It's not going to pass legal muster. It is adverse and goes against our state constitution, our city charter, and union contracts. It does no one any good to propose and put on the table legislation that will never see the light of day and will not be enforceable.
Thank you. We are at the halfway point, and I just want to suggest that we give the panel a hand so far. Very thoughtful. Plus, I needed to move my arms. Okay, the next question, Mary Lubian will be the first respondent. With our high school graduation rate hovering around 50%, how can we attract well-paying jobs that will raise people out of poverty?
Well, I would like to respond, I guess, in a different way. I don't think it's about attracting jobs. I think it's about supporting the small and medium-sized businesses we already have. Statewide, half of our state workers are employed by small businesses, and the data shows that when you support small businesses, the money stays in our community and jobs are created where people live. So we have a program in Rochester called KIVA, which is a loan program that gives out loans not just based on your credit score, but also on your social credit. We also have an initiative for worker-owned cooperatives in Rochester called Own Rochester. I think we need to expand and further fund both of those initiatives. But mainly, small businesses is hard. My husband is a small business owner, and I know the struggles. You have insurance, you have workers' comp, but he received a Kiva loan, and he now employs 3 workers. And I think that with the businesses that we already have, we can do a lot to spur more jobs.
So a statistic that bothers me more than the 50% that we're apparently up to as far as our graduation rate is concerned is how many of our students are actually capable of going on to college or secondary education after that. And unfortunately, the number is frighteningly low. I think before we can even talk about how to bring our families up out of the poverty line, we really need to focus on the educational excellence of our students. We need to empower our families to help our students, as I spoke about earlier, to strengthen from within, if you will, so that when jobs do come into the Rochester area, when businesses do begin to come into the Rochester area, our students can actually populate those organizations. They can work in these companies. We talked about photonics for an awful long time, but before we started talking about photonics, we talked about the workforce that was going to actually work in that industry and whether or not our students or our families were even able to work in there. They were not. So as far as how do we attract jobs for it, I think we need to develop our workforce. If corporations see that there's a strong workforce, a very educated population here, they'll come. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a very large issue in the city of Rochester. Going back to poverty and wanting to lift people out of poverty, they need to have jobs. They need to have quality jobs. We need to have quality small businesses in our community. I witnessed the University of Rochester take over of East High School, just as one example. It has been an amazing transformation from what it was 5 years ago to what it is today. Kids are proud. They're excited to be there. I talk to them when they're outside. It's a totally different atmosphere. They really look forward to going to college and getting to school. It definitely is very uplifting compared to what I witnessed about 5 or 6 years ago. As far as graduation rates, obviously we need to take U of R's lead on how they've been able to bring up graduation rates. We need, like I said, the small businesses, and we also need trades. I think that's very important. Not everybody's book smart, but you can teach plumbing, doing electricians, being an auto mechanic, being able to work in HVAC. I think that's extremely important. We're losing a lot of people who do that. As homeowners, it's very hard to find the work. I think that's very important. Thank you.
So no question, we have lots of challenges here, but we also have opportunities. Rochester was just named as the #1 city in the country poised for technological growth. We need to own that and get excited about that and pursue that. We have the foundation here in place to do so. Bryce just talked about the partnership between East High and EPO with the University of Rochester. We have RIT, we have phenomenal higher education institutes right in our backyard that we can pair up with schools and have the ability for these individuals to pursue higher education to get to the tech jobs that we're being told are right here, that we have the opportunity to have, and we can be the hub of that. Now, in addition, some folks just aren't cut out for college, for higher education. We need to support apprenticeship programs and job-ready training for young folks or even older individuals that don't want to go to higher education institutes. But again, we need to own the fact that we do have opportunity, we need to be optimistic, and we need to track down and continue to cultivate these relationships and make the most out of them. We have them right here in our backyard.
So in response to the 50% graduation rates, we know that strong schools are a key tool for strong communities. Strong schools really secure economic investments for families who are willing to live in the city and spend their money in the city and build businesses within the city that will create jobs. Zip codes should not be a determinant of the quality of education of people who live in the city. However, it is currently. So we need to have a community school model and a neighborhood school model that ensures that every single school in the city of Rochester has equal opportunity for students who attend. That is one way to encourage people to stay in the city of Rochester and build a stronger tax base in the city of Rochester.
Thank you. Right, and now we're going to the next question, and the first respondent will be, once again, Mr. Harris. The Rochester 2034 plan highlights the importance of our parks for mental health, recreation, reducing the urban heat island effect, and attracting people to our region. What would you do to protect the integrity of our parks, especially Cobb's Hill, our most intensively used park?
So I think I would begin by taking a look at the rules governing our parks use to make sure that they're appropriate. And I say that because, you know, my wife and I are often guests at the Village Bakery, and we'll go over to Cobb's Hill to sit at the Lake Riley and eat our sandwiches on the breakfast. But the signage there is wrong. It actually gives a very misleading information as to when the park is open during the wintertime and when the park is open during the summertime. And if that's indicative of exactly how we're regulating our park usage, then there's a problem. I would like to see us take a look at all of our parking regulations. I would make sure our lighting was sufficient. I would make sure our hedges were trimmed back so that our bike paths were clear. Washington Grove, for me, is a brilliant jewel in the East District that not a whole lot of people know about, not enough people use, but it's very, very well maintained by the neighbors that live up around there because they have ownership of it. I think we need to make sure that places like that are very well advertised, that people know that they're there, that the rules are very clear, and that we as a city spend the money through budget to make sure that they're maintained as properly as possible and as well as possible. That's what I do.
Thank you. I want to start off by saying it's a complete travesty what's going on with Cobb's Hill. And not only is it a travesty for the fact of trying to put high-rise apartments in a park, that would not happen in many other cities, but also we have people who live in those apartments that I'm very concerned about that have been told their rents will stay the same, but for how long? I think that's a very, very valid question. How long are the rents going to stay the same? We should not be building more housing in parks. We have Cobb's Hill, Highland, Genesee Valley, Tryon, just to name a few. This city has absolutely stunning and beautiful parks that people use. A lot of young people have been using our parks all summer long now for kickball. It's bringing people back into the city. It sounds funny, it's kickball, but there's hundreds, if not thousands of them going into our parks. I think that we have a gem of a city when it comes to our green spaces, our parks, our riverways, and we really need to build on that. But going back to the Cobb's Hill, it never should have gotten to court. We should not have lawsuits. The city should have worked with the neighbors and come up with a plan. And no neighbor should have to spend thousands of dollars out of their pocket just because City Hall does not want to listen to them. Thank you.
So no question, we need to do whatever we can to support the beauty of our park, the safety of our parks, and the vibrancy. I grew up in these parks at Cobb's Hill, Tryon Park, playing baseball, riding my bike, and we need to continue, again, to grow and attract folks to these places. Getting neighbors and neighborhoods invested in them is the key to it, and North Whitten is great at that. Getting people to take pride in their community, in the small parks. We build small parks. Having folks plant flowers. Again, pride in your community, pride in what is around you, what you see every day, and recognizing that there are small gems. We built a small park behind the Winfield over off of Winton Road there. There are beautiful areas, we can cultivate them. People really have pride in their community when they see people taking care of the park, taking care of the green space. So again, on the council, I would advocate for our parks, whatever I could, to maintain their beauty, to put money into them. And again, it promotes pride, safety, and it's an outlet for kids like myself, riding their bike and playing ball. We need safe, appropriate places for that.
I will definitely prioritize maintaining the beauty of our parks. We have just extremely beautiful parks, and even for mental health, just being at the parks, hanging out with friends and having this safe community environment. So I will always support investing and continuing to keep our parks beautiful. Another thing I am very interested in is creating more community gardens. Community gardens are really transformative and can really bring communities together. Just planting a seed and seeing it grow, teaching kids and families how to grow their own food, growing tomatoes, growing onions, growing so many different things. We definitely have a lot of open space to create community gardens, and I think we need to have a process where we encourage people to start different community gardens and getting the community involved.
That was such a good setup for this question because it really highlighted why open green space is so important. However, there's another issue, is climate change. So, green space and parks help us filter carbon out of our air. So they're very important to me. And I also agree that the Cobb's Hill development is setting a dangerous precedent, that our parks are open season for private interests to build high-end luxury housing. And if you all don't know, there's a GoFundMe campaign to help fund the appeal for the Cobb's Hill Village. I also agree that we need more community gardens. In my neighborhood in Parcells, we have many community gardens operated by churches and by neighborhood groups. And by giving the neighborhoods ownerships of their vacant lot, we can inspire and encourage more community gardening. And finally, I'll end with Parcel 5, our biggest open space in the city. And I believe that should be an open, flexible, mixed-use green space where the community can come together and really honor the legacy of Midtown as a community gathering space. Thank you.
And we have another question about our school district, beginning with Mr. Miller. Do you support the proposed referendum on a state takeover of the Rochester City School District? If not, what suggestions do you have for improving the school district?
I think it is premature to talk about the referendum yet, but how we can make big changes is when we go to the polls in November, there's plenty of school board members who have not been doing what they're supposed to for our children. Our children have been left behind. It is time for new leadership. We've had 5, 6, 7 superintendents in the last decade. It is absolutely ridiculous that our school board and our schools and our school superintendents cannot manage to work for the betterment of our children. I find it very appalling that the school district does not work well with the city of Rochester. The city of Rochester, at the end of the day, has to write a check for over $100 million a year to support the school district, but yet there is no conversations on where the money goes, and it's always he said and she said. It's not right. We're gambling our children's futures. Now, with being said, if this does not work with the new school board and we work on some things, at that point we may have to look at a referendum, because it's just something that is very important that we cannot dangle our children's lives. Thank you.
So again, the question is whether I'd support a referendum. It's hard to say no. A referendum is democracy at work. It's folks getting their voice through the polls. So again, I would support a referendum, but I think it is premature, as Bryce said, because I do not support a takeover of our school district. I think that is extremely premature in light of the factors I said earlier. We have, again, the Distinguished Educators Report and recommendations. We have a new school board coming. We have a new superintendent. And we also have some proposed legislation from Assemblyman Harry Bronson, for instance, that proposes some actual changes that we can do using the resources that we have here at home. So while again, it's hard to say I wouldn't be in support of a referendum, I do not support a takeover of our school district. As I mentioned before, I think that we need to look to the local successful models and build on those. And those are, again, the East TPO, School 17, School 23, School 58. What's working there? What are we doing, and how can we apply that more broadly? And so, again, I think we pursue it that way. It's also a slippery slope to remove elected officials. Where does that stop? So again, I think that's too far, and I think we need to focus on what we have here at home and be optimistic about our future.
I do not support a takeover of the school district by the state. I believe that it is premature. It's a misdiagnosis of the issue that the students are facing. To blame 7 people who are not, enrolled in the city school district, they're not the parents of the students, for the low performance of city school students, it points to a severe misunderstanding of the actual problems students and families face in this district. In order to ensure that our board, however, is successful, I do propose funding technical assistance to ensure that the policies they create to implement transformative change is done in a way that's closely monitored and based in research. I also support providing training to the board regarding conflict resolution, providing how to actually implement change. People on the school board are there because they care. However, they may not have the tools and the skills to actually implement their thoughts and ideas. So we as a city can fund and support our board and ensure that they are successful in how our school is operated.
I am a teacher in the district. I'm also a parent in the district, so I see this from a couple of different angles. And I do not support a takeover by the state. We would be giving up our democratic right to vote in school board members. We would be sacrificing parents' voices. Once the state takes over, we no longer have a say in how our school district is run. And yes, we need change, but I don't believe that this is the change, especially when the state has provided us with no plan on how they would do differently. The city has a lot that they could do to encourage growth in our students. You know, we, at the city, we are in charge of the libraries and the rec centers, and we have everything to do with the child when they're outside of school, and all of the issues that they bring to school with them that prevent them from being ready to learn. So we as a community need to wrap ourselves around our schools, roll up our sleeves, and know that we can do this, and we don't need the state to come and save us. Thank you.
I do support the notion of the state coming in to take care of or to take over our school district. And that's not an easy thing to say, because I recognize the difficulty and the slippery slope that Mike described in, you know, removing people that are elected to the positions that they hold. But we've failed our students for years. We have failed for decades. And we've tried all the things that we've been discussing up here, and we have not been able to get it done. We've had 5 superintendents in 5 years. We've had a number of different members that have come on to the school board, and that has not worked. I'm going to support it, and I'll give them the 5 years to come in and try to turn something around, because I think it's necessary. And one of the most heartbreaking things I heard in my travels talking to people were families that were ready to move out of the city of Rochester because their kids were becoming school-aged. I talked to one gentleman whose wife actually went back to school to get her PhD just so she could develop a way of educating our kids better outside and apart from the school district. We have to come up with a change.
And we've come to the final question before we receive the audience's question. And we begin with Mr. Geraci. What will you do to improve relations between residents and City Hall?
Well, it's all about transparency and giving people a voice. Okay, that's what our primary duty is as a council person, giving each and every member of our community and of our district a voice. It's an extension of what I do on a day-to-day basis as an advocate. And examples can be as simple as a neighbor who needs something done, a complaint on the street. You need to be that person's advocate. A small business needing help getting access to a parking lot, you need to be that person's advocate. And you need to be able to do so in a manner that crosses over the boundaries of thinking, that, again, unites people as opposed to pushing them apart. One of the reasons I mentioned earlier that I decided to get involved in the race is seeing how divisive we've become. The word compromise seeming to go out the window, and you need to have, in my opinion, a base, a calm voice, hopefully, and a voice of reason, in a sense. I've worked for years with individuals in City Hall. I have relationships with folks in City Hall. I love my neighbors, and I would love to bring everyone together in that capacity. And you can do so even if you disagree with them. That's the most important part here. But it's important to be able to look at your neighbors and at your community members and be able to, again, explain to them in terms that they can understand why you do or do not support what they need. And that's your function, your primary job as a city council person, is to be the ear, the advocate for those individuals in City Hall.
I view my role on council as a role of service and ensuring that people have access to me. Therefore, I believe that we should have council meetings, not only at City Hall, but in different spaces in the community where people can access these meetings. I think we need to think about the times we're having these meetings, the barriers of childcare, the inability of people to have transportation to get to these meetings, and even people simply not knowing these meetings exist and there are meetings they can attend. We need to really focus on going door to door and letting people know there is an opportunity for civic engagement and your voice matters. We have to do that by actively showing people that their voice matters. We need to be where people are. Some people have physical limitations that prevent them from being able to move around. We need to get to spaces that are accessible where they can be a part of these meetings we have. Transforming the idea of we can't reach the people who represent us. We need to be in the communities of the people we represent. And I will be committed to ensuring that all my constituents actually know my name, know who I am, and know what I stand for.
There's a saying that you can't expect people to come to your table, you have to go to their tables. The table at City Hall is pretty inaccessible for a lot of the reasons that Stanley mentioned. We do need to take into account that we can't just hold public input meetings at 6 o'clock on a Monday night and check our box and say, well, we got our community input for the 5 people that came. We really need to be proactive. We need to be at every neighborhood meeting. We need to be proactive with letting people know the legislation that's coming through. We need to be collaborating with neighborhoods in the development and asking them the kinds of things that they want to see. One of the ideas I had for being more accessible is to set up hours in the library. You know, just having hours in the community where people don't have to come down to City Hall. They can come to a place that they're already going. So I agree that we really need to step it up in the city. And I'll end with, we need to fix the city website. You can't find anything on there. And we need to be utilizing the tools that we have in technology. Everyone's got a cell phone. We should be, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I was successful in my career because I was able to build relationships and get out there and actually solve problems. And the way that you improve the relationship between residents and City Hall is... Can you guys hear me? The way you do it. So the way you do that is, thanks. The way you do that is to put yourself out there, to make yourself available. If I'm lucky enough to be elected to City Council, you're not going to have to come to City Hall to find me. I'm going to be out there talking to you anyway. I'm going to be on Parcells. I'm going to be on Grand. I'm going to be on Park Avenue. I'm likely going to be eating on Park Avenue. So that's how you do it. You make yourself available, as Stanley said. You put yourself out there. You remain part of the community. I'm your neighbor. I live right over here on Browncroft, or in Browncroft neighborhood on Yarmouth Road. I'm going to be very, very easy to find. I'm going to be Wayne. I started my career as telling people I was Wayne. That's how I'm going to finish my career, hopefully, as your city council representative. That's how I'll do that.
I want to start off by not saying what I am going to do, but what I have done. In the last 10 years, I've pretty much made it my life's work to get to know my neighbors, to improve my neighborhood, to work with people, whether it has been putting flower pots on corners of streets or working with kids, to really take pride in them and water the flowers and take pictures with them, getting to know neighbors, having social events, making sure that everybody knows who each other are. I think that's extremely important to make sure that all neighbors know who represents them not only, but who their neighbors are. That has been very important to me. Also, we need to get back down to the basics. Realistically, you go to City Hall, whether you're a citizen, a neighborhood president, or anything, sometimes they don't seem that interested when you're talking. I think that's extremely disheartening. We need to really get out there and work for the people that we are elected to represent. And it's very important. We are the voice of our neighbors. We're not for political, agendas or backroom deals. We're literally in it to represent the people that we were elected to represent. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. And we have a slew of questions from the audience. We'll move through them as quickly as we can. In the interest of time, I'd like to ask each candidate to take 1 minute to respond to these questions. Okay? Fair enough? And we'll start with Stanley Martin. If you could put forth one as I was saying, if you could put forth one new idea or policy to improve our city, what would it be?
I would enact a Fair Development Act that
Only have one of those on at a time. Turn yours off so while she's talking.
Pardon?
I think if you turn yours off while she's talking, they're somehow connected. I think. I don't know for sure.
It's been working.
I don't know if I can turn it off. It has to be turned off elsewhere.
Go ahead. Testing.
So I would enact a Fair Development Act where the legislation would require that development comes in a way that is very transparent and includes community benefit agreements. Before development is agreed upon, the community should, there should be proof that the community is fully aware of what's happening. There should be proof that people in the neighborhood have heard about it, have signed some kind of petition before it goes up. And there should also be proof of how tax breaks are assigned to one developer versus the other, especially when it comes to public money being utilized to incentivize development. The community should be 100% involved in developments, and there should be transparency and there should be inclusion in how developments plays out. We want to ensure that developments meets the needs of the community, and we went wrong with not having community involvement in deciding about the high-rise going up in Cobb's Hill. So we don't want that to happen again, and I think if we set precedents on how we go about developing new things with community involvement, we can really change the course of how things are done here in Rochester.
Judy, would you just raise the yellow when there are 15 seconds left of their 1 minute?
Not do the red, the green at 30?
No.
Okay.
Okay. All right, same question, Ms. Lupian.
It's really exciting. Actually, yesterday at the state level, there was a bunch of tenant protections that were enacted, and rent control, removing the geographic restriction, was actually passed, which is really exciting for a lot of housing advocates up here that we've been fighting for. So we now have the opportunity as the city to opt in to local rent control. And some people may be afraid of that, but what that really means is that rents don't change right now, but it regulates the increase to no more than 4%. And right now, many of the landlords that I know, they're not even able to raise their rents more than 1%, but it really targets the low end of the spectrum where landlords are raising the rents 20, 30% in neighborhoods like mine, where they're not necessarily improving the housing, but the housing market can now support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would institute a youth council. I would pull youth from every neighborhood in our city to liaison with city council, to advocate for themselves, to come into council and to say what was important to them, the way that they would like to see the city of Rochester grow and develop. And I would also ask them to be advocates for us in the community when questions about city government came up. The most powerful thing I've seen is the work that's been, or one of the most powerful things is the work that I've seen done with teen empowerment. They actually train those youth organizers to go out into the community and interact with their peers to change the game from the inside. I would establish a youth council that would be monthly, to liaison with city council to make sure that council was always pointed in the direction of those individuals that are going to be in charge of the city of Rochester in the not so very near future.
My whole philosophy is putting neighbors first, and that's how I would start, is by putting our neighbors first. We need help fixing up our homes. A lot of them are on average over 100 years old. Depending on the neighborhood you're in, some neighborhoods are better off than others, but doing a lot of walking, even neighborhoods that are considered our best neighborhoods have a lot of elderly people or people who were hit by hard times that their homes need a lot of help. I think that's very important. We need to make sure our housing stock lasts for the next 100 years as well. I think we need to help city residents open quality small businesses and help employ our youth and help employ people in the city. I also think we need to get involved more, and I would do that by creating more technology where people can actually be able to advocate for their neighborhoods and themselves from their home. Not everybody can get down to City Hall. It's not always easy, but I think through technology we can really do something. Thank you.
So while I think many of us drove here tonight, it's important to understand that in our district even, we have a major lack of access to transportation that we need to account for and be considerate of. And that affects many different things. It affects the ability to move and enjoy our neighbors and our neighborhoods and your bordering neighborhoods. But it also affects individuals' ability to get to work, to get to some of the job centers and hubs in the outlying communities. What I would do is I would again seek to look to the resources that we already have here. We have major, huge employers, University of Rochester, RIT, Paychecks. We have large employers that account for upwards of 60,000 individuals in our community. We need to incentivize those large employers to move their people and help us move their people, to provide direct transportation busing or bus passes. We can again utilize resources that we have here locally to help our people, to help our community, and to help individuals without having to reach out and take more money from taxes or from the federal government.
Okay, thank you all. We'll start now with, did we not start the last question with Wednesday?
We started the last question with May.
Okay, all right, so I am right. Ms. Lupian, what exactly can City Council do to address the climate crisis locally? And if you are on city council, what specific climate actions will you propose?
I am so glad you asked that question. I am a member of Mothers Out Front, which is a group advocating for livable climate for our children. Climate change can feel really scary, but it's actually, there's many concrete things we can do at a local level. And one concrete thing we can do is opt into community choice aggregation. Sounds kind of complicated, but it's really pooling our businesses, our public buildings, and our residences to go out to the market and bid for energy, kind of like a Sam's Club for energy. And in doing so, we get a lower price for renewable energy than we're currently paying now. And it would immediately switch the entire city over to renewables overnight. So I'm really excited about that specific policy. But we can also, incentivize local solar through that by saying that with RG&E, as local solar comes online, they have to buy it, which will incentivize more green jobs in our community. So I'm really excited about that proposal.
Mr. Harris.
I think I'm going to piggyback on Stanley's idea for the community gardens, and actually Stanley and Mary's idea for the community gardens. I had actually written something about that recently. I think it's a brilliant way for us to foster good nutrition, to teach a skill, and to also give back to our community, or give back to our environment, actually, so that we're a healthier society in general. I'm actually going to agree with pretty much everything my colleagues said up here today. I like the idea of the solar initiatives that we're putting forth. I'd like to see that expand. I'd also like to see us reduce our footprint of motor vehicle traffic by increasing our bike usage here in the city of Rochester. The bike rental program that the city has, I'm hoping that expands. I know they're considering going to scooters. I have some questions about that because I've seen what those scooters do in some other cities around the country, San Diego being one of them. I would like to do, or to look at ways that we can support our environment by investing in good stuff like this.
I'm going to start with some realistic things I think that we could do pretty easily to combat climate crisis. I think we need to have a better installation program for our homes. I think we need to help people with new furnaces. As somebody who probably could use a new furnace, I know how much is going out my windows in my furnace every month. So that's something I'm working on. I think that we need to have window programs for restoration. I do believe in good beautification and zoning, so I don't always say we have to replace the windows, but we need to at least restore the windows back to their original charm, but also make sure that the heat's staying inside the house. I also believe that we need to have more tasteful LED lighting throughout our streets. I think that's something that can be done as well, as the city has already started doing an LED lighting program with most of our new street construction. And another thing coming from the car industry that I have noticed, for those who may be interested in a plug-in hybrid or an electric car, we're pretty far behind when it comes to a charging infrastructure. There's not enough chargers out there. It's something, being in the car industry, a lot of people have had a very hard time transitioning due to our lack of infrastructure in the city of Rochester when it comes to charging. Thank you.
So I agree, we need to reduce our carbon footprint, with respect to climate change. We need to do that through responsible development and changes in our community. We need to, as a city council, we are reviewing proposals for change, for new builds, or for whoever it may be. We need to be critical of the developers and how they're going to be mindful of climate change and reducing that footprint. We also need to cultivate innovation, through innovation, partnerships between RG&E and, for instance, in my home, smart thermostat that allows you to hopefully reduce your footprint on a day-to-day basis. We are, in my estimation, should have broad access broadband to everyone in the city. I'm happy to see that we're now allowing students to bring home tablets that will allow them to have internet in their home, but we should all have that. We should all have access to internet, and we should all have access to partnerships between technological and our RG&E and our other providers here, so that we can all, again, seek to reduce our footprint every day.
I think we have to start with educating people about what climate change is and bring them to the table to feel that this is something that they can actually, be a part of when it comes to transforming our future. And even more on policy levels, I think we should incentivize small businesses to cut down on plastic and help them build infrastructure to create alternatives to plastic. We should also be investing in bikeable, walkable streets because when people can bike to work and there's the infrastructure to do that, that significantly reduces our carbon footprint. We should also involve young people, a lot of different artists and activists who work on climate change in city council policy making when it comes to serving our community. But it all starts with education and involving the community and the experts who actually really know how to build a citywide infrastructure when addressing climate change.
Thank you. Let's see, about how much more time would you say we have?
3 minutes.
All right, then, just a moment. We have time for one more question.
A hard one.
It's hard to choose one or pick a hard one. Just a moment, bear with me. All right.
What was that?
Hold up the yellow sign, please.
All right. And we'll be starting with Wayne Harris. What would you do about the fair distribution of government money in Rochester? What would you do to make sure it is spent correctly? And then as an example, I'm not sure I can make this out. Does this say FIS money? Come on, who's the writer?
Sounds right.
Okay. So what would you do about the fair distribution of government money in Rochester? What would you do to make sure it is spent correctly?
This is a hard question to answer in a minute, but my focus is always going to be on our citizens and our communities. I'm going to insist that when our budget cycle rolls around, for any new proposal that comes forward, we consider how best that's going to impact. And by doing, or the only way to do that is by getting input from the community. So for me to make sure that our distribution of funding remains fair, we have to include the citizens that are going to be impacted by it. You know, there'd be way more to talk about, and I'd love to talk more about it towards the end if we can, but you know, with a minute period of time, that's a big topic to talk about. So I would include us, all of us.
Thank you. Speaking with the FIS individually, it is something that has been very concerning to a lot of different neighborhood groups and neighbors throughout the East District, but I'm sure throughout the city. Unfortunately, I believe the city has a long history of focusing in on one neighborhood while they're allowing another neighborhood to go down or not be as successful as it should be. We need to be able to spread this money out throughout our city. We're all taxpayers, we all deserve to have a nice place to live, and we all deserve as much as we can possibly get from our government. All the money should not be going into one neighborhood, it needs to go into all of the neighborhoods. And I understand that some neighborhoods have different needs than others, but we all have things that could really help our neighborhoods in the city, and I think we could come together and have a conversation, have stakeholders from every neighborhood to decide where the funds are allocated. Thank you.
So when we're talking about government money, we're talking about our money. So it's no greater importance that we understand and we're mindful of where we're putting that money. We can't lose sight of our neighbors. We can't lose sight of our neighbors. It's important to understand the history, the redlining that was discussed. If we understand where we came from, we can understand how to address it and how to change. And so in that case, again, not forgetting about those neighbors who have experienced the redlining in the past that has gotten us to the situation we are now, but to also allocate resources accordingly, understanding that perhaps more should go to these areas because of that history. Being a student, asking the right questions, scrutinizing the budget, scrutinizing development, that's our key job and duty as a council member, and again, listening to everyone and never forgetting about our neighbors.
Our role as council members is to increase the quality of life for people who live in our city. In order to do that, there should be participatory budgeting when it comes to how funds are allocated. And in addition to that, true transparency. Recently with the city anti-poverty initiatives. We tried out participatory budgeting, and that was a huge success in the sense that people felt that their vote mattered, and they felt that what the agencies they wanted the money to go to actually got that money. So we need to include that when it comes to how we allocate funding in our city.
In the city's 2034 plan, it talks about the idea of investing in middle market neighborhoods. And what that really means is neighborhoods that aren't doing so terribly, but they're not our wonderful neighborhoods like Browncroft and Cobbs Hill. And I would suggest that those neighborhoods are already on the upswing, and investing in them will only increase the displacement that we're seeing due to gentrification. And the neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested, that are really bad off, we need to be spending our money there to bring their standard of living and improve their quality of life. I also agree that participatory budgeting is a really effective tool of gathering community input on our neighborhoods initiatives. We've also been spending a lot of our money downtown, and we need to bring that money back into our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you all. Unlike your opening statement, I will not deprive you of your closing remarks. And so you have the honor, Mr. Harris, of giving your 1 minute closing remark.
Well, first of all, thank you very, very much for spending your evening coming down here and talking with us. I'm sure we appreciate it, but I know I appreciate it. So I'm here as a retired gentleman who has basically gotten to a point where he doesn't know anything anymore except you as the community that I want to serve. I'm not supported by any special interests. I don't have any big money donors coming. I've been doing this myself, and I've been doing it because I care. I've been doing it because I serve the city of Rochester. That's what I know, and that's what I'd like to continue to do for you. So I'm asking you on June 25th to consider very strongly voting for me and allow me to continue to serve you as your next city council representative. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Rose.
I just want to thank everybody for making time in their evening to hear us tonight. It has been a complete honor of mine to serve the city and my neighborhood. I have been doing it for years. I have been a volunteer. I've never taken a penny to do what I think is right in my city. We may not always agree up here, but I think we also agree on a lot of things. I think it is very important to represent neighbors. It is very important to represent the interests of the people that we are elected to represent. The people that I was elected to represent as a volunteer vice chair of the Village Association. I take great pride in what a wonderful neighborhood we have. I was 21 years old when I bought my house. I could have lived anywhere. I chose the city. I love diversity. I love working with people. I love the character of the city. I love that we have neighborhood associations. I love that people come together. That's not something I always see in the suburbs. People run in their house and shut the door. I really love working with people, and I want to take that to a grander scale at City Hall. And I hope that you take the time to vote for me on June 25th. And if you have any other questions, you can reach me at bryce@rochester.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Miller. Mr. Geraci.
So in looking through the issues tonight, I think it's clear that there's no cookie-cutter approach to doing this job, to being a council person. The issues are very important, they're very complex, and the issues that face us today will not be the same that we see next year, but we need to take a consistent approach to how we analyze those issues. We need to be collaborative, involve our neighbors, and again, you need to get down to the facts, okay? You need to be able to analyze and ask important questions. But not be a robot. We are a representative, and I am a voice, again, for my neighbors to City Hall. So taking all of those into account, I think that my skill set, my history, my love for this city, I'm never leaving this city, and I vow to bring passion, advocacy, and representation to each individual in our district for the better of our entire city.
Mr. Geraci, thank you. Ms. Martin.
So I hope you got a chance to get to know me today, but one thing I do want to point out is I am the only person sitting here who has actually sat down to write out policy regarding how we move forward in our city. I think that's important, and it says that I sat down, talked to advocates, talked to people doing the work, done the research, and figured out how we can move forward with our city. My background as a human services person, my background working to advance meaningful public policy really equips me to tackle the challenges in our city on a structural level. I am energized, I'm excited, I am just ready to really represent your interests, ensure that your voices are amplified, and make my role as a city council person a shared role where we have shared power and a shared seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Ms. Lupian.
I just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for really being an active participant in our democracy. I'm Mary Lupian, and I am running because I want us, our neighbors, and our community to thrive. As your city council person, I will work with you to create policy, to create more stable, affordable housing and protect tenants' rights, to improve our transportation system, to make our streets more walkable and bikeable, and to take local action on climate. I'm running because I want to break open our government and let the light shine in. I want to give the control, the access, and the influence that's been up until now reserved for only the wealthy and the powerful. I will work with you, for you, and by your side, and together we will make Rochester a better place for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to all the candidates. In closing, we have a representative from the Brown Croft Norton Village Neighborhood Association. That person, yes. Well, then, okay. And I want to thank everyone again for coming out tonight. It's been a pleasure to serve as your moderator. And please give some thought to what you've heard tonight. Talk to your neighbors, your family, encourage them to come out and vote on the 25th. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for coming. And I don't have to tell you to go out and vote, because I know you will. But try to spread the word and get as many as you can to vote. Our city's in trouble, and we all got to stay together and raise it up. Thank you.
Thanks again to the Lutheran Church of the Incarnate Word, to the candidates, and for your courage to put yourselves out there, definitely. And to the League of Women Voters for helping to educate the electorate. That's hard and often underappreciated work, so they should be thanked for that as well.
Yes, thank you to all for coming tonight. And I would like to say the secret to the city, our city neighborhoods, is, as Wayne said, it's working together. And that's the answer with City Hall, because it's amazing if you go down and talk to the people at City Hall, and if they really want to help, they will. And in terms of the police department, Mary and I only know so well the years that we walked East Main Street week after week after week with Jim Shepard, who was our commander. He ended up becoming our chief. But there is a serious concern when a neighborhood does work with the police. It works out. Actually, the Jim Shepard, when he was with our neighborhood trying to clean up the drugs, I'll never forget the day, right, Mary? We're standing out front of a house, and he said, okay, there were about 5 of us standing there, and he gave us the direction. You rent a property on East Main Street, and then I will be very happy because you'll have presence. So we went out, and that's what we're doing to this day. And Marilyn is the chairman of our festival that we have every year, because we earn our own money to pay, so we have a place for the police to come 24 hours a day. So we do have police presence. So that's an example how neighbors have to work together with the citizens that are representing us at City Council and the police department and everybody involved. Thank you.
And the candidates would love to stay around for a while. I'm sure they just have some informal conversation with you, so please help yourselves.